Michael Snyder is our resident film critic. True story.
True story is based on a true story about a New York Times reporter named Michael Finkel who gets himself in trouble when he apparently violates journalistic ethics in a big article and then finds out that an accused killer has taken on his identity. The killer's captured and they end up meeting, and it turns into this bizarre kind of perverse buddy picture about the killer and the reporter. Again, it's based on a true story, and it probably is undermined by the reporter being played by Jonah Hill and the killer being played by James Franco, because we identify them as kind of media personalities as much as actors these days. And they do a decent job, but the script itself is a little muddled, and despite it being, of course, based on a true story, the third act goes to hell in a way. The Finkel character is trying to find out the real, actual events of Longo's murder accusation and what he's done to end up in jail, and it ends up being lies within truths within lies, etc. And I just feel like Franco's performance is kind of confusing in ways, and it's an interesting film, and there are odd choices regarding the way Franco plays the killer. Despite the acknowledgement that the story is true, I remain puzzled about the way it eventually plays out, specifically in the context of this movie, which is directed by a guy named Rupert Gould. Finkel himself wrote the script along with Gould, and I'm left cold by the whole thing.
Unfriended.
Shockingly entertaining horror film that is probably a piece of genius when it comes to making a movie on a small budget. The entire film, and obviously I wouldn't be so enthusiastic if it didn't work, the whole film is basically a computer screen with a Skype conference call and various other web pages as the story unfolds. Basically, all about a bunch of teenagers who are being stalked by someone in the wake of the suicide of one of their classmates that they may or may not be culpable in. And it's kind of a tract in some ways against cyberbullying, but it's also fantastic to watch these jerks, these smug, self-entitled, weasel kids get what's coming to them. I tell you what, I enjoyed the hell out of Unfriended. Very inspired use of our contemporary technology and showing its shortcomings and the kind of inescapable lack of privacy that we're all facing. It's clever, it's short and to the point, and maybe it's not your cup of tea, but I thought Unfriended was an inspired horror. Directed by someone named Levan Gabrias. Kudos all around. Unfriended. It worked.
Is it as good as The Babadook, which is now finally on Netflix streaming?
Well, you know what? It isn't as good as The Babadook or It Follows, both terrific horror films, but this is good in its own way. It takes the conventions of the teen slasher flick and turns them on their head and uses, again, modern technology and basically uses that to its advantage. And Facebook, Skype, and Snapchat and Instagram branded right and left, and no problem. It worked, boy. It worked.
Ex Machina.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite films of the year so far. Very smart, very thrilling, and very well-executed science fiction adventure that investigates the sentience of lifelike robotics programmed with a sophisticated AI. Very clever. Starring Oscar Isaac, who was in Inside Llewyn Davis, and a very violent year, fine actor. Domhnall Gleeson, who's kind of Eddie Redmayne light and was in one of the best episodes of the great British sci-fi anthology series Black Mirror. And here he's good. Both he and Oscar Isaac, by the way, are going to be in a little upcoming thing called the next Star Wars movie. And also Alicia Vikander, who is a Scandinavian actress who most recently was in the Sword and Sorcery Drek Seventh Son. Here she is superb. Alex Garland, who wrote 28 Days Later and Sunshine, both really interesting genre films, wrote and directed this. This is his, I think, first feature film as a director, and he nailed it. Gleason plays an underling to a Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google-type founder guru of a worldwide info-gathering search engine called Blue Book. After winning an office lottery, this tech monkey is invited to hang with the big boss at the CEO's remote hideaway, right? and he's invited to check out the company's new AI and administer a sort of Turing test. And as I think we've discussed in the past, particularly in the wake of the Alan Turing documentary, the Turing test is intended to detect human-like intelligence in a machine. Only in this case, the AI is in the form of a very realistic-looking and behaving female-identified robot, played by Vikander. This is a tense, beautiful film with seamless, believable special effects. If we didn't have the special effects technology we have now, they couldn't have pulled this off. You buy it. How can I put this? First off, the CGI is used to a purpose, like in the Paddington Bear movie, and it's vivid and incredibly effective. You'll believe a woman can clank and whir like a machine. I mean, this is one of the best films I've seen to deal with the issues and possible repercussions of AI and technology possibly outgrowing its creators. High marks for Ex Machina.
The longest ride.
Well, low marks for this stuff. This is a drama based on yet another best-selling novel from Nicholas Sparks, who cranks out these romance novels. They're sort of like Mick novels, I guess. But in this case, former champion bull rider on the comeback trail begins a love affair with a college student about to take her dream job in New York City. And there's a lot of legacy performers in here that almost make this palatable. Scott Eastwood, son of Clint Eastwood. Alan Alda, here, he's his own legacy. Una Chaplin and Jack Houston. That would be the granddaughter of Charlie Chaplin and the grandson of John Houston. And so, terrific. And Britt Robertson plays the young college girl, and she's going to be one of the stars of the upcoming George Clooney, Brad Bird extravaganza Tomorrowland, and she's good. You know, the best of these things since The Notebook, which was the first Nicholas Sparks adaptation I saw, which I liked, actually. But this sort of rips off The Notebook. It has sort of two concurrent stories, one in the past and one in the present, and we see these two romances unfold. Where The Notebook was a legitimate tearjerker, this is not anywhere in that ballpark. You know what? It felt like the longest film, the longest ride.
Clouds of Sils Maria.
Oh, this is great stuff. Olivier Assayas, who's a French writer-director and who is exceptionally good with actresses, is in fine form here. It's basically inside show business setting as a grande dame actress played by the fantastic Juliette Binoche, is asked to reprise the play that actually made her famous, wherein she played the ingenue. Now she's playing the older woman in this sort of twisted tale of two women obsessed with one another, a younger one and an older one. And there are beautiful reflections in the supposed realistic interactions behind the scenes between the actress and her assistant, who is played, and very well played, by Kristen Stewart of Twilight. I mean, this shows that she can act. She goes toe-to-toe with Juliette Binoche. And as the young contemporary ingenue who's going to take the role that first made the Binoche character famous, Chloe Moretz. So you have beautiful setting, terrific actresses, honest dialogue, and a realistic depiction of a relationship between two women wherein business and friendship get blurred. This is a fine film, and in terms of Assayas, he's done a few things that I've really liked, like Paris Je t'aime and Summer Hours and Demon Lover, Late August, Early September, and Irma Vep, all good films, and this is right up there. Very impressive piece of work. Clouds of Sils Maria.
Kill Me Three Times.
Well, this was a little disappointing. It's a darkly comic thriller starring Simon Pegg of Shaun of the Dead and Star Trek as an assassin hired to kill a young woman, not that young, in a small seaside Australian town, and she's played by Alice Braga, but she's a little more durable than you'd think. It's kind of a Australian mix of crime flick and black comedy that ends up feeling like substandard Tarantino covered in Vegemite. There are crosses and double crosses and casual violence and lovely vistas and a good cast, but ultimately it's in the meh zone. And it's pretty misleading since Pegg is in this central role, but he's not on screen enough, and he doesn't do his thing. It's nowhere near as meta-clever as one of his films. Brian Brown, the acclaimed Australian actor, is in this thing playing like a cop. Luke Hemsworth, one of the Hemsworth brothers, and Teresa Palmer, a young Aussie actress on the way up. They're all involved, but I was kind of disappointed in Kill Me Three Times.
5 to 7.
Well, let's wrap it with this film. 5 to 7 was an absolutely charming and very, very palpable example of real romance in an urban environment between an older woman and a younger man. I was pretty impressed with this thing. There's your 20-something writer, Brian, played by Anton Yelchin, and he meets an older French woman who happens to be married, played by the Bond girl Bérénice Marlowe from Skyfall, and she's not willing to divorce her husband or abandon her children, but she wants the magic that she's feeling with this young writer, and so they begin an affair. And the title 5 to 7, those are the hours where it's sort of accepted that she can kind of have this fling with this young man. And one of the reasons it's okay is her husband is doing the same thing with a mistress. And again, the supporting players here are good in terms of like Olivia Thirlby as the mistress. You also get Lambert Wilson as the husband, who's a nice guy. And everybody's so sort of friendly and sophisticated, but it's got to blow up in your face eventually. Frank Langella and Glenn Close play his parents, and they're pretty hilarious. And it's just a sweet, wonderful film that I just thought was charming, and also it's going to be great on video. I hope people seek it out. Anton Yelchin played opposite Felicity Jones in a similarly honest contemporary romance called Like Crazy, which I like a little better than this, but I have to tell you, Bérénice Marlowe is fantastic in this. Not a woman of a certain age, playing what she is, a woman in her 30s, but just rich and deep and lovely, and Yelchin is a good actor. And so you buy it. You just buy the whole thing. I dug it.
Michael Snyder will talk to you next week.